The sun hung low in the sky, casting its warm, golden light over the neighborhood, a picturesque tableau of suburban tranquility. The symphony of chirping birds and the rustling leaves in the crisp morning breeze could have lulled anyone into a serene sense of peace. Anyone, perhaps, except Karen. Her name was whispered with the same kind of unease reserved for ghost stories or neighborhood legends. Karen from the Homeowners Association, the watchful eye, the self-appointed guardian of suburban order. She thrived on rules and rigidity, wielding them like a knight would brandish a sword, ready to prune anything that dared to disrupt her carefully curated kingdom. My lawn was the freshest shade of green you'd ever seen, the sort of vibrant hue that seemed to defy nature itself, a lush carpet of emerald against the backdrop of cookie-cutter hedges and beige houses. It was a labor of love, a meditative retreat where each blade of grass was a soldier in my quiet rebellion against monotony. On that particular morning, as I admired the handiwork of my devoted watering regimen, I noticed her silhouette in her window. The curtain twitched slightly, the first ripple in the pond. She struck with the precision of a hawk. The shrill ringtone of my phone shattered the morning calm. An email from the HOA, of course. A message crafted with the precision of a legal document, verbose yet hollow, wrapped in layers of bureaucratic jargon. The lawn, apparently, was too green. A violation, as if nature herself had erred in its exuberance. I smiled at the absurdity. Too green. In a world that seemed to thrive on mediocrity, my lawn's vibrancy was a threat. I imagined the grass chuckling with me, each blade a conspirator in this unintentional uprising. I responded with calm assurance, a simple acknowledgement of receipt, a promise to address the issue. I knew she'd expect a frenzy of activity, a mad dash to conform. Instead, I sipped my coffee, letting time flow gently like the stream that ran through the nearby woods. Days passed with the silent tenacity of growing grass. I could feel her watching, her anticipation almost palpable. But what I lacked in speed, I made up for in patience and quiet defiance. The morning came when she made her move. The wail of sirens preceded the arrival of the patrol car, a beacon of blue and red lights reflecting on the morning dew, a crescendo in our operatic dance. The officer, bemused but professional, approached with caution, reading from the script of a play he hadn't signed up for. I watched from my porch, the scene unfolding with an almost cinematic quality. He glanced at my verdant lawn, then at his notebook, unsure whether to laugh or lament. His nod acknowledged the irony we both recognized but could not voice. There, on the porch steps, I stood, a quiet figure against the backdrop of manicured chaos, as my lawn basked in its unintended spotlight. Karen's silhouette was back at her window, a shadow behind the glass, her presence a reminder that battles in suburbia were rarely fought with swords, but with the unyielding persistence of nature itself. The officer left, the silence returning as quickly as it had been shattered, an epilogue to the morning's drama, leaving only the whispering grass and a quiet sense of victory. It was just the beginning. I knew she'd be back. But for now, I reveled in the irony, as rich and deep as the green beneath my feet. As the soft morning light filtered through my kitchen window, I sipped my coffee, the aroma rising in lazy spirals. The grass that had become an unlikely battleground glistened with dew, each blade an emerald defiance against Karen's growing tyranny. I watched it sway softly in the breeze, a vibrant testament to nature's resilience against the absurdity of human pettiness. But Karen was not one to be underestimated. Her wrath reeked of clipped coupons and PTA meetings, seasoned with a sprinkle of misplaced authority. She had already declared war on my lawn, her arsenal consisting of absurd decrees and the neighborhood's ever-busy grapevine. I was the latest subject in her tapestry of suburban folklore, woven with whispers and little lies that spread faster than dandelions. The first citation appeared like a specter in the night, taped to my door with officious precision. It detailed an infraction for excessive greenness, a new entry in the HOA's voluminous rulebook that seemed to grow daily under Karen's meticulous care. I marveled at the creativity behind the accusation. How does one measure the legality of a color? I imagined Karen squinting at the lawn, a self-appointed arbiter of chlorophyll crimes. My mailbox soon became a repository for notices, each one more incredulous than the last. A mandate for mandatory grass-length inspections, a citation for potential turf larceny, a phrase that left me chuckling at its sheer ridiculousness. The artistry she employed in crafting these fabrications could almost be admired, if not for its disruptive impact on my mornings. The neighbors, caught in Karen's web, began to adopt her rhetoric. Conversations once filled with casual pleasantries turned pointed, their words pricked with judgment and a hint of unease. As I walked through the neighborhood, I felt their eyes, a mix of pity and suspicion. Their whispers rustling like the leaves in the trees. I could almost hear their thoughts. What kind of person grows grass so green, so flagrantly? Yet, amidst the clamor, I found a quiet strength within myself. My resolve hardened with each absurdity. I would not succumb to her manufactured chaos. The lawn, in its verdant glory, stood as my silent ally. It didn't need to shout to be heard, didn't need to wilt under scrutiny. It simply was. Unashamedly, unapologetically, the day climaxed with Karen's pièce de résistance, a neighborhood meeting convened solely to debate the legality of my lawn. I was the defendant in a trial of whispers, my jury a collection of lawn chairs spread across Karen's yard. Her gavel was a spatula, wielded with the confidence of a woman whose authority was rarely questioned. She directed her gaze towards me, eyes sharp yet shallow, and uttered a single, pointed accusation. Unnatural. The word hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in a judgment. It was a moment of high tension, a turning point that demanded response. I met her gaze, and in that silence, the irony of her crusade crystallized. There was nothing unnatural about growth, about life pushing against boundaries to thrive. Her battle was not with me, but with the world's inherent chaos that she sought to control. Words were unnecessary. The lawn swayed gently behind me, an unspoken declaration of resilience, and I stood there, quietly powerful, steadfast before her theatrics. The absurdity of it all lay bare. Karen's fixation, the citations, the whispered gossip, all crumbling paper shields against the simple truth that some things, like grass, are meant to grow. With the sprinkler still hissing like a snake in the evening's heat, I stood on my porch and watched the police cruiser pull away. The red and blue lights receded, leaving a trail of judgment in their wake. Karen's complaint echoed in my mind, too green to be legal, as if nature itself had conspired against her penchant for drab monotony. I leaned against the doorframe, absorbing the absurdity of it all. My lawn, a simple stretch of grass, a mundane tapestry of green, had become the battleground for Karen's zealous outrage, her latest crusade. Yet, the universe seemed to relish irony, for it was her own rules, her cherished HOA bylaws, that would unspool her agenda. I spent the next morning documenting. My camera became a silent witness, capturing the verdant expanse from every angle. Each blade of grass stood as a testament to my quiet rebellion, flourishing under the morning sun. The sprinklers flicked on, droplets catching the light in a fleeting dance, a mosaic of defiance. The HOA handbook sat open on my kitchen table, its pages a labyrinth of regulations. Somewhere in that bureaucratic tome lay the means to turn Karen's own weaponry against her. I scoured through clauses, each paragraph a stepping stone toward my subtle counter. It was in the minutiae of lawn care standards and environmental policies that I found my ally. Karen's focus was her downfall. She had overstepped, targeting what the bylaws themselves protected, the community's commitment to sustainable practices. My lawn, lush and environmentally friendly, was a model of the very guidelines she upheld with fanatical zeal. I set my plan into motion quietly. An email to the HOA board, meticulously crafted, highlighted my adherence to their prized sustainability initiatives. Attached were the photos of my lawn, framed not as an affront but as a paragon of ecological responsibility. Days turned into a waiting game. Karen's accusations, once a simmering threat, cooled to whispers among the neighborhood. I took my time, tending to my garden with the same care one might tend to a brewing storm. My lawn was a sanctuary, a green sea of tranquility in a world that churned with her incessant meddling. When the response finally came, it was as swift as it was satisfying. An official letter from the HOA, sent not just to me but to every household, a commendation for setting a standard in environmental responsibility. The irony was delicious. Karen's campaign had unwittingly cast me as a local hero. In the aftermath, Karen's presence dwindled, her fury reduced to a murmur. She took to avoiding the subject as if silence could erase her miscalculated assault. Her defeat was not a spectacle, but rather a quiet retreat into the shadows of her own making. I watched from my porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of resignation and victory. The lawn lay before me, lush and unyielding, a verdant testament to the power of subtlety. The air buzzed with the twilight symphony of crickets and cicadas, a serenade to the end of Karen's reign. In the end, it wasn't just about the lawn. It was about the quiet strength of standing against pettiness with poise and precision. I smiled to myself, savoring the sweet, ironic justice of a lawn too green to be legal, now celebrated rather than censured. Thus, life resumed its course, each day draped in the emerald of my victory, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is a lawn well manicured. The lawn had become a spectacle, a verdant stage upon which the absurd drama of our neighborhood played out. It was too green, Karen insisted, too lush, too alive. The ambulance lights had faded, but their ghostly flash lingered in the minds of those who witnessed the folly. A lawn, a simple patch of grass, had become the unlikely cause célèbre of our little cul-de-sac. The neighbors began to notice. It started with the sideways glances, the barely concealed whispers that carried on the breeze like seeds of doubt. They walked by more often, some slowing their pace to take in the offending greenery. Not all in disapproval. Some smiled, others shook their heads, but the air was thick with a kind of communal disbelief. I could feel the neighborhood's pulse quicken. Each day brought more scrutiny. Each evening, the glow of porch lights flickered on as neighbors gathered in small clusters, the murmurs of their conversations like the rustle of leaves. Karen had stirred the pot, and now everyone was sipping the bitter brew. It was ironic, really, that something so simplistic had become a battleground. A lawn was just a lawn, or so it should have been. Yet here we were, embroiled in a saga that was as ridiculous as it was revealing. This place, our suburban Eden, had its own serpent, and it wore a name tag that read Karen. There was a quiet power in watching it unfold, a satisfaction in seeing the tapestry of our lives woven with threads of irony and defiance. My grass stood defiant, a green beacon of what could be if left untamed by the HOA's iron grip. It was amusing in a way that such a trivial thing could unearth the hidden fractures in our neighborhood's facade. Others began to question, to wonder aloud if perhaps the rules had become too rigid. The idea that conformity should yield to common sense took root, and Karen's crusade against my lawn became a rallying cry for change. Not that I had intended to start a revolution, but revolutions have begun over less. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of crimson and gold, I could see Karen pacing behind her curtains, a shadow among shadows. Her righteous indignation had turned inward, and I wondered if she saw the folly of it all, or if she merely plotted her next move. The night brought a silence that was both eerie and expectant. The solitude allowed reflection, and I found myself pondering the nature of power and resistance. Karen wielded power like a blunt instrument, while I preferred the subtlety of quiet rebellion. Perhaps this was why the lawn had become my unspoken manifesto. In the end, it was not just about the lawn or the rules or even Karen. It was about the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we construct to make sense of our world. And sometimes those narratives are challenged by something as simple as a patch of green that refuses to conform. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool night air, savoring the scent of grass and possibility. The world had shifted, just a fraction, but enough to feel, enough to know that change, like grass, begins beneath the surface, unseen until it breaks through, vibrant and insistent. The morning sun spilled over the horizon like liquid gold, drenching the world in a light that seemed almost too pure for the scene unfolding in front of me. The dew on my too-green lawn shimmered, a sea of tiny diamonds that would no doubt provoke another tirade from Karen. Her accusations of illegal fertilizers still hung in the air, a cocktail of absurdity and spite. I'd spent the evening before steeped in research, the kind of late-night rabbit hole that transforms quiet resolve into strategic action. As the printer hummed softly in the corner, spitting out papers with a rhythmic precision, I could feel the weight of the plan settling comfortably around my shoulders. It was time to fight back, but not with words or raised voices. No, I would wield the law like a scalpel, precise and unyielding. I took a sip of coffee, its warmth grounding me in the moment. The sweet, nutty aroma circled around me, a gentle reminder of simpler days. Days before Karen, before HOAs, before everything became about the length of grass blades and the impossible standards of their green. I chuckled, a sound that felt foreign in the quiet of the morning. Irony had become my closest ally. The first step was a simple one, a letter, neatly typed, addressed to the association. Professional, devoid of the emotion that had simmered beneath the surface for so long. I detailed the harassment, the baseless accusations, the misuse of emergency services over something as innocuous as a lawn. Each fact was a brushstroke, painting a picture not of defiance but of reason. It's a funny thing, logic. It cuts through chaos like a lighthouse beam through fog, illuminating truths that some would rather leave in shadow. I imagined Karen's face as she read the letter, the slow, dawning realization that her antics were about to face the scrutiny of the board she so fervently idolized. There was satisfaction in that image, but it was tempered by a deeper understanding. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming peace. I sealed the envelope, pressing down firmly on the flap. The adhesive was cold and final, like a judge's gavel or the snap of a lock. I placed it in my outbox with a gentle certainty. There would be no turning back now. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. Birds chirped in the trees lining the street, their melodies weaving through the air like an orchestral prelude. I watched as Karen emerged from her house, shoulders squared, eyes scanning for infractions like a hawk on the hunt. She paused, her gaze lingering on the perfection of my lawn. I imagined her mind working furiously, trying to conjure new accusations, new ways to bend reality to her will. But today, the grass was just grass, green enough to be beautiful, legal enough to be ignored. As I stood there, the weight of the moment settled in. I hadn't won yet. There would likely be more battles, more absurdities thrown my way. But for the first time, there was clarity, a path forward, paved not with anger, but with quiet, unyielding strength. Karen turned away, her retreat a silent acknowledgement of the invisible line now drawn between us. I watched her go, a strange sense of calm washing over me. In the end, it wasn't about the lawn. It was about boundaries, the kind that are more about respect than property lines. The sun climbed higher, chasing shadows from my yard. And as I stood there, coffee in hand and resolve in heart, I understood something simple and profound. Sometimes, the greenest lawns aren't made with fertilizers or forbidden secrets. Sometimes, they're cultivated with patience, strategy, and a little bit of irony. The air felt oddly still as I stepped onto my porch, the morning sun casting long shadows across the neatly manicured lawn. It was a scene so peaceful, it bordered on the surreal, given the chaos that had unfurled just days before. The grass, lush and green, stood as a testament to resilience, both of the earth and of community spirit. After Karen's outburst, her claim that my lawn was too green to be legal, there had been a shift. The neighbors, who once exchanged wary glances, nodded and smiled now. Their children played freely, bikes drawing loops on the pavement, laughter replacing the tension of whispered complaints. It seemed that sanity had returned, settling back into its rightful place. Karen, however, was another story. Her presence had receded, much like a storm that had passed, leaving only a whisper of its former fury. She had become the specter of her own convictions, pacing the confines of her yard like a restless sentinel, her eyes scanning for transgressions that no longer existed. As I tended to the roses, lovingly trimming away the wilted petals, I thought of the irony. My garden had become a symbol of rebellion, a vivid retort to Karen's monotonous order. I chuckled softly, imagining how she must fume at the sight, her anger wilting like the flowers she refused to nurture. The community meeting had been a revelation, a gathering fueled by quiet resolve rather than grievance. Chairs scraped on concrete as people settled in, an audience of the disenchanted, ready to reclaim harmony from the clutches of petty tyranny. Karen had attempted to assert her will, her voice a sharp blade meant to cut through dissent. But it faltered, met with the unyielding resistance of collective will. In the end, it was a single line from Mrs. Thompson, whose roses had been a source of Karen's ire, that turned the tide. Her voice, usually soft, rang with undeniable truth. "We are tired of living in fear of our own lawns." Silence followed, then applause that built like a slow clap of thunder. And so, the vote was cast. Karen's authority, a crumbling edifice, was stripped and scattered like leaves in the wind. The bylaws she wielded with such fervor were rewritten, lines redrawn to favor freedom over control. The community, renewed and invigorated, embraced its newfound autonomy. Karen, now sidelined, lingered on the periphery. Her gaze, once sharp, softened, not in defeat, but perhaps in reluctant acceptance. She had become a relic atop a pedestal of her own making, the embodiment of a past the community wished to forget. I returned to my task, the rhythmic snip of shears a soothing melody. The smell of fresh-cut grass mingled with the perfume of blooms as I watched the neighborhood begin its day. Life, like the seasons, was resilient. It moved forward, unburdened by the weight of bygone grievances. In that moment, I felt a quiet, satisfying power in the simple act of tending to my garden. The blooms stretched toward the sun, unafraid, audacious in their own existence. And I too stood firm, an unassuming figure in a story of green defiance, content in the knowledge that the roots of community ran deeper than any one person's reign.